I'd like to go ahead and start on time. I'm sure people will be chiming in and coming on a bit late. We have about 70 online right now. So I'm Tom Trujillo, Commodore of the Trans-Pacific Yacht Club. Very excited about our 2023 race. Quickly introduce who else you can see on the screen. Of course, our guest, Peter Eisler, will be coming back in a few minutes for the meat and potatoes of the webinar. Our Vice Commodore, Bill Guilfoyle, is on board. Rear Commodore Alan Andrews, our board member and seminar chair Randy Smith, who's done a great job. Thank you, Randy. Amazing job of getting these seminars together. Great guests. And Artie Means is on board also, who's going to be helping Peter out kind of in the background of the seminar. We'll talk a little bit more about the logistics and how that's going to run in a couple of minutes. I am just going to talk for a few just seconds. As of today, we have 65 entries for the race starting in June and July. We're very excited about that. One of the big things that you're going to see different this year, I think, is a broad variety of Transpac apparel, both with the Transpac logos and burgees, but also a huge amount of things that the skippers and crews will be able to order individually for their boats. So when I'm done with my little 90 seconds here, I'm going to send a link in chat. So everybody can look at your chat. You can see the link for regatta gear and a specific spot to go to where you can get all kinds of Transpac apparel. There's polo shirts, hats, Hawaiian shirts, socks, ties. There's a really cool coffee cup that has a chart of San Pedro on one end and Honolulu in the other, like showing the span of the race. So Larry has done a really, really great job at Regatta Gear putting this together. So again, I'll send that link in a couple minutes when we get done with the introductions. And that's all I have. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions about the race, commodore@transpacyc.com. And that said, Bill, do you have a couple things to say?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. There's two things I want to draw your attention to while we have this large group assembled. The first is insurance. Tom sent out a message a week or so ago, but we want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that the recreational marine insurance industry has undergone significant change since our last race. There's fewer underwriters in the marketplace, and many are offering reduced coverage at often a higher cost. The original requirements required that 30%, including the person in charge and watch captains, attend the hands-on seminar and have a certificate for that. And that an additional 30% had to do the one-day or online coursework. Because of COVID, we collapsed that into one requirement for 60% of the crew. And we overlooked that change when we reissued the NOR for 2023. So the amendment can be found on the website. If you go to Transpac Race at the top menu bar, it'll bring you right to the notice board. You can read the amendment and all the details. But just to be clear, this year, 30% of the crew, including watch captains and person in charge, have to have the hands-on training, and an additional 30% have to have the online course. So that's all I've got. I thank everybody for putting this on, Randy and Peter, and thank you all for coming.
Okay, with that, we'll turn it over to Randy to go ahead and introduce the webinar for this evening.
Thanks very much, guys. And just a real quick plug. I'm looking at the attendee list here, and you know, I'm seeing tons of friends and people I've raced with and against, and I know some of you are not members of Transpac Yacht Club because you haven't done the race yet, maybe. But if you have done the race, I've been a member for a while, and I got on the board last year, and I'm having the best time hanging out with a bunch of great sailors and reconnecting with people. And so, if you have not joined Transpac Yacht Club and you've done the race, we'd love to have you. So, anyways, on to tonight. I thought we did pretty well in the first seminar. I had a great group of speakers for that one. And I think we're kind of taking it to the next level tonight. I've been fortunate enough to race with Peter over the years and against him. And if I'm ever doing an offshore race, I'm always paying attention to where the boat that he is on is going, because it's probably going the right way. And so, we're really fortunate to get to spend an evening with Peter and the surprise guest tonight, which you can see his name down in the lower right-hand corner, Mr. Artie Means. So between these two guys, the amount of knowledge that they have with systems and navigating and, their resumes, racing records are just incredible. So Peter's going to do most of the talking tonight, and Artie's going to be lurking around in the Q&A and chat rooms. And so you guys, feel free to fire away on in the chat room with some questions. Bill's going to organize those. Artie's going to do his best to kind of answer stuff. Peter's hopefully going to spend the first 45 minutes answering some of the questions that you guys have already sent in and going through his presentation. Then hopefully the second half will be a little more wide open Q&A and, get into the real cool stuff that you guys want to hear about. So with that, Peter, take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Randy, and thank you, Transpac Yacht Club. Yeah, I just need a minute though, because I haven't finished writing checks for my Transpac team gear and to renew my membership. What was it in the yacht club? Yeah, is there anything else? Insurance? I don't need insurance. I don't have a boat. This is not an advertisement. Thanks everybody for coming, and it's an honor and pleasure for me to do this. I have I was born in Hawaii. I heard about the Transpac race before I even ever sailed on a boat, and to have done it as many times as I have, and to be in the position to where I can help you guys out, and have been helping out competitors for, I think, well over a decade. I've been doing some sort of Transpac seminar under the aegis of the Transpac Yacht Club, and I appreciate their continued support in this. So onwards, we'll try to cover as much ground as we can, and I thank you for hanging in there. And it's been a while since I've done a Zoom presentation, so bear with me if my mouse doesn't work as fast as it usually does. All right, on to tonight's presentation. Preparing for Transpac 2023. This is basically, I'm going to go through a subset of the presentation slides that we did for the last Transpac, on which I sailed Pyewacket 70. And as a way to kind of orient you, that course went into my online school that I created with Chris Bedford during COVID, under the aegis of Eisler, the Academy of Peter Eisler's Academy of Sailing Secrets. There's Marine Weather University, and we have dozens and dozens of courses. A lot of weather-related courses, including Chris Bedford's amazing curriculum. He's the best sailing meteorologist there is out there, and there's some good ones, and some race-specific classes, like our Racing to Hawaii class, which this PowerPoint is a subset of. I wanted to kind of go through it rather quickly, because I think all the points on it are important. It'll help all of us sort of get our head around the big picture of racing to Hawaii, and it's more than just navigating the boat or using expedition, but we've got to make good decisions, and we've got to sail fast, and we've got to work with a team. And so I like to sort of see big picture. And then, as Randy said, when we first talked about doing this a few months ago, Randy felt, and we both agreed it'd be great to sort of open it up more to questions from you guys earlier rather than having it be a formal presentation. And anyway, this this whole course is online at the Academy for you to watch. Again, it's already been said, but my good friend and longtime teammate and guru when it comes to setting up race boats with a working electronic system that I can use and works for me and my system of navigating and doing strategy and racing. We've got Artie from Waypoint Racing in the room. Virtually, he's down the street in San Diego, and probably many of you know Artie as he's the B&G guy on the West Coast. His company is the leader in terms of raceboat marine electronics, and he is a darn good sailor as well. And not too long ago, he set a record in a pretty important race called the Transpac, which he still holds, navigating Mighty Merlot. So I'm really honored to have him here. The way it's going to work is I'll be talking straight through for a while and and answering your questions. If I make a flub or Artie wants to add any comments to that, watch for his comments to everybody in the chat room. If you have a specific question of Artie that you don't want to wait for me to answer, or think that it just might be so specific that it's worth getting it down right now, post a chat to everybody in the chat room, not a private chat, but to Artie. Hey, Artie, question. And if you post it to all, that way it'll be saved so we can all see the answers later. And then Artie can either respond or say, no, I'll let Peter handle that when he gets to the Q&A. So he is a resource. You basically have two instructors here, one walking around the room, looking at your computers, helping you out with your questions all the time. So please use that resource. He knows a ton about all these subjects and more. And so I'm really proud to have him. And thank you, Artie, for spending 2 hours with us tonight. All right. The Eisler Academy, as I said, is a school of which online school. All the classes are online. Occasionally we do a live course and then we post the class and the resources online, and I'm really, really proud of it. There's Chris Bedford on the right. We first worked together in the America's Cup with DC back in Perth, Australia. Both of us were rookies at that point in the America's Cup game, and Chris has gone to great things: Olympics, around the world races, record attempts, etc., etc. I have already signed up my boat, Pyewacket, the sled, for Chris's services, doing weather briefings before the start of the race, and he does fill up. So I consider this to be a no-brainer of having a couple of live briefings and maybe some recorded briefings leading up to the race with Chris. I know some students of his have done really in-depth historical analyses for boat optimization and stuff. He is a wizard, and I wouldn't do any big offshore race without him. And I have a degree in meteorology from an Ivy League college, and I still learn from him. He's like talking to Stan, honey. You learn something every time you talk to him. Well, we created this online university. I was going to redo all my Northview classes and create sort of update my expedition classes during COVID. And Chris, we were doing something together. He said, I've always wanted to do a weather school. I have a great idea for a curriculum. Like, that sounds so much cooler and more, even better than doing the broader coverage in the expedition. And so that's what the first step was, to create Marine Weather University in his curriculum. And I strongly, those of you that haven't checked it out, go to marineweatheru.com. There's tons of free classes there to get an idea of Chris's teaching style and what we have. And then there are the curriculum as well. And I'm gonna, in the upper left there, the Transpac course, that is basically an expanded version of this PowerPoint. I'll be referring to it and going through it pretty quick. All that is already online. I think it's a 3 hours worth of lectures. lectures, and then lots of course resources. I continue to add to it. I added historical weather grid files for the last 10 years around the dates of this year's race, for those of you that want to do historical weather routing. So that stays updated, and it's good for the whole crew. So definitely check that out. The weather models course is incredible. The fundamentals course is one of the two big. Our curriculum, our full-length courses, there's 8 classes there. There's also an advanced course which doubles down in that. And have a browse around, take a look. Very proud of it, but understand that this presentation I'm doing in the front half of this is sort of a mini subset of a course that's already online that you can take. I use extensively in my life expedition, navigation, and sailing software created by Marty and my great good friend Nick White from New Zealand. I was around when Nick first started developing an expedition. At that point, he called it Explorer, and it's amazing where he has gone with it. Now it's, you know, de facto the racing navigation software used on board all the big boats, even those, the French guys and women that sail with use Adrena software, which does similar type work. Expeditions on all their computers. And expeditionmarine.com is where you can get it through Eisler Academy. And thanks to Nick, for those of you that want to play around with it and aren't exposed to it, don't have a copy from your boat computer or the backup copy on your home computer, Nick provides through Artie, who's one of the dealers, a 30-day trial license. More about that later. But Expedition is, there are other software that do similar things, but none do it as well as that. And once you learn, a person learns a particular tool, as long as it stays updated and current, and that's, maybe Nick does that to a fault, it's worth hanging on that. Here is the outline to that course that's online, the Racing to Hawaii at the Academy. The Preparing to Race, a great weather overview by Chris, which I'm sorry, he's not online tonight, but that's 20-30 minutes of maybe longer briefing on the big picture of weather in Hawaii races that is well worth reviewing before you do a race to Hawaii. So I'm going to get into a bit of race strategy here in my formal presentation, navigator preparation, sailing team communication. I love talking about that because I think it's one area where we probably, all of us, can improve the most in getting more out of our team. And so much of that is communication. In the online class of a full-on presentation on marine electronics, talking about everything from water makers to alternators to creating a charging budget and how to prepare your boat for a long race like Hawaii. You don't want to be the boat where they tell the story like, their electronic system went out on the first day and they didn't have any battery power for the rest of the race. It's a long race. Weather routing with Expedition, I based on the questions, and thanks for those of you that did go to the Q&A, that questionnaire that I created. That's going to be a big portion of this class and in the Q&A as well. Safety, I'm never going to do, after my experience on board Rambler in the Fastnet race, I'm never doing another offshore presentation without at least mentioning some safety considerations, focusing on the considerations in the nav station. Bit on race tracking and yellow brick and some homework for you navigators. We'll get the Caribbean 600 coming up in a couple weeks, and I'll get you set up to start tracking that. And pre-race preparation, ensemble routing. So let's quickly going through the preparing to race section. Step one, whether you're writing a book or you're creating a course, online course, you first need an outline. In order to do the outline, you need to know the material. In this case, the material is the rules of the race. And obviously you already know, you've already been to this website because you signed up for this webinar, but it's probably a link that, I don't know about you, but I go to the race office link back and forth so much in the weeks and days before the start of the race. big picture, thinking Transpac. Now, my first Transpac was Hawaii race was with Dave Ullman on the Hana Ho, which was a Santa Cruz 50. There were about 11 or maybe more 50 Santa Cruz 50s. They were brand new at that point, racing in that race. I think it was 1981. And the navigation and the tactics and strategy for the race have changed a lot since then. I was the navigator, and the way I prepared for the race was my roommate at college. I was in college, and my roommate was Stan Honey, so I grilled Stan as much as I could. And then I went to the library at Yale, and they had all the NOAA weather maps in these big bound versions for all the years. And I just went to the month of July and looked at weather maps and tried to memorize what was going on. I don't think any of it stuck, but that's what we did back then. Big picture, preparation is the key to success in this race and really any race. The preparation in terms of equipment, in terms of your sails, obviously your safety gear, getting everything race ready. And that doesn't mean spending a lot of time at the dock and getting everything perfect, but it means getting out there with the crew and making sure the stuff works, getting your sailmaker out there and making sure there's no weak links or places a sail could chafe because it's a long race. Make sure everything is ready for the race. And the mantra for these Hawaii races remains, keep it light. We're always going to be weighing the sacrifice of whether we bring something like a spare set of, can of oil in case we have to do an oil change during the race. Certainly do it if you were delivering the boat to Hawaii or if you're cruising with your family. But in this race, you make some serious sacrifices to lighten the boat. I remember Stan told me that he sailed the sled double-handed in one of the Hawaii races years and years ago. And he said it was so much faster with just 2 people on board. Obviously, it took a little while longer to do maneuvers and stuff, but being light in a downwind VMG race is super important. Keep that in the back of your mind, a mantra. Crew, very important. The organization of the crew, how you divide up the watches, the watch captains, how you structure that, how you balance the experience level on board the boat. Of course, we always want to bring new people into the game, and all of us did our first race at some time, but you want to have some solid hands with some experience on board as well, because it is a long offshore race where stuff can happen. And we're talking about the crew. You want to keep it light, because every crew member comes with X amount of weight, not just their gear bag. I mean, yeah, you can cut off the ends of the toothbrushes, and hey, if they bring an extra sweater, good. I want my crew to be comfortable. But the food, the water, there's a multiplier for every crew member you bring. And there are some boats where the hiking power, whether in the bunk or on the rail, is worth carrying those extra people. But even a boat like a TP52, Pac 52, the fast ones in the last few years have sailed with a pretty small crew. And practicing. This is probably the most important and the least done amount of preparation. And we all have jobs and we can't practice that much. But before a race like Hawaii, if we're serious about doing well, having fun, being safe, the time on the boat is well worthwhile, especially getting some offshore and night sailing time, because we don't do a lot of that. Sure, maybe some of you doing the Islands race, maybe you're doing the Cabo race, but let's face it, we don't sail offshore that much at night, and it naturally takes a couple of days. I don't know about you, but for me to really get in the flow, even if I'm well practiced, of the watch systems and everything when you're sailing. But just if the boat hasn't sailed offshore, especially if you're sailing a boat that normally only does coastal or maybe one overnight races, practicing that. Where some other points that might be worth thinking about and putting on your list on your calendar is setting up a practice schedule for some heavy air reaching, because there can be some of that. It can also be light air reaching, but there will be some reaching before you get to that VMG stage. Reefing, especially for the modern boats. I mean, you could be reefing on your way to West End, and some of the modern boats are faster reefed. Heck, Artie probably was reefed most of the way to Hawaii on board the Mod 7 or the Mighty Merlot. Getting your sail crossovers sorted out in real time, in reality, not just relying on the sailmaker's chart. The sailmaker's chart, force them to provide one to you scaled to masthead wind speed and true wind angle, but then go out there and confirm it. And you'll always be able to fine tune it some. Getting your stacking sorted out. We're blessed, I guess, to have a dry boat down below and be able to keep all our sails up on deck. So let's be as efficient as possible in being able to keep the weight as far outboard as possible, because we are allowed to keep our sails and move the sail portion of our boat's ballast as needed during the race. But make sure it's positioned as efficiently as possible. It's as easy as possible to destack and make a maneuver, and make sure that everybody on the boat knows the system. The worst thing possible is you do that first jive and it's like, hey, where does this strap go? Or where, somebody new was doing something for the first time. Practice, 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 practice. And then what is this race all about? Downwind VMG sailing. You have to be able to be fast VMG mode sailing. In the course at the Eisler Academy, then with there is as I said, a long presentation done by Chris Bedford on the weather of the Hawaii race. No course, I don't think, on the tactics and strategy navigation to Hawaii would be complete without including Stan Honey's stages of the race and some of his wisdom. In fact, in the course, in the Academy, the Hawaii race course, I've collected every PowerPoint I think that Stan's ever done on both Pac Cup and Transpac, and some interviews too. And with his blessing, thanks, Stan, it's all there. Great resources, it's all in that Hawaii course. But let's review some of them, and some of you have dreamed this before and already know it. But the stages that he considers, and it's kind of good to break any race down into stages. Doesn't mean every race will neatly slot in this way, but it's a fairly good way to get your head around the problem at hand. The first stage of the race, the start to the Synoptic Breeze. That could be as soon as, say, West End Catalina. I usually think of it at that, but there have been some races where you didn't get, you were still in sort of the coastal influence, the eddy coming off of Point Conception, light air zone, and didn't get out into sort of the northwest. We don't call them trades out here, but they might as well be because they're so regular out there, the Synoptic Breeze. So that being able to get to the Synoptic Breeze and begin that part of the race can be a decider in the race. Then next stage is the reach, which we were just talking about. Once you do get to that Synoptic Breeze and you're racing to the ridge. And here it's super important to have a waypoint picked, a course to which you are VMCing towards. It's a term you probably all understand, but you want to make sure that everybody who sails on the boat in the race understands the concept of VMC. It's basically the same as VMG, but instead of the destination, the optimum destination being directly downwind or directly upwind in the case of VMG sailing, VMC sailing is the destination is a compass bearing, and the VMC is the fastest angle. May not be directly at it, often is. Straight line is good, especially if the mark's really close, but when the mark destination starts getting farther away, as in this challenge here where you're starting the reach, it's maybe 250, 300 miles to the ridge, which we'll talk about in a second, then you can start VMCing. up in the lulls, down in the puffs. Done that in the dinghies. Pick your waypoint, beware of riding too close to the high. Then the next section is the kite goes up. You get through that ridge surprisingly quickly. And all those reaching sails that you stressed out of what should we bring for this and that get used or not used in the course of 3 to 12 hours. And then you have up the big kite, and it may be up the rest of the race or some variation of it. You're in the slot car mode. You are laying the mark, not laying the mark, but you are on the long jibe, and the other jibe is so heinously off course that it's not worth sailing on. Hence the concept of the slot cars. And at that point, you're sailing in probably in an ocean downwind mode, unless you're trying to get to the south. Ocean downwind mode probably means you're sailing, probably have the throttle down a little bit harder than you will be when you're normally running on a short course. Then the next stage is the run, and some considerations there are cloud streets and squall tactics. All that's in the academy course, details on that. And then finally the finish approach, basically which side, how you approach the finish. I mean, in a very simplistic scenario, that decision you should always approach from the right, because there's a high up to the north of you. The wind goes clockwise around the high, so the wind's always clocking to the right more the further west you get. And if the wind's clocking more, you're getting more of a right shift. You want to go to the right corner looking downwind and jibe on the ley line or just before the ley line and then get headed down into the finish line. It ain't that simple, but that is the big picture. In fact, what I would call this stand stages is the conceptual model of the Transpac race or any Hawaii race. And a conceptual model is important to have in your head because it can help you make a decision when the weather models don't agree or the conditions that you're experiencing aren't what's being predicted. It's important that you do have a big picture understanding of the situation. It's why when Chris Bedford, there's a bunch of free courses on the Academy, talks about how his process of making a daily forecast, calls it the forecast funnel. He starts with a big picture. He looks at the global weather chart, the highs and the lows, the isobars and the fronts, and then he moves it down to the regional, and then finally to the fine tune, the high resolution models. He doesn't jump to his weather app, which we are all too prone to do. You know, like the weather app says it's going to blow 12 to 13. Better to have a conceptual model. Listen, in the Jamaica race just 2 weeks ago, I had a situation where the models were just not agreeing. None of the models agreed. 6 hours into the future, they should be agreeing by now, right? Or pretty close. And I'll pick the best one based on which model, the current wind I'm experiencing it's matching. Now it wasn't working like that. So I just threw everything out and said, okay, big picture in this race was we were going through the Bahamas, and the next new wind, the next wind that was going to set us off was going to be the trade winds, which were going to fill in as this coal filtered away through the Bahamas. So we just played the left corner as hard as we could within reason, within VMC reason, and it came good. And I realized I should be thinking about the conceptual model more. And when people ask my courses, hey, what should I do if I download 2 models and they don't agree? Use your brain. And use the pre-race study that you've done. And stand stages are an important part of the pre-race study. They won't always work out perfect, but it's important to have this in your head. Let's take we'll turn on the spotlighting tool so we see the red shading here. This has been added by Nick, in the last 5 or 6 years the time shading on an optimal route, and you can go in and control, and it tells you where how far you can deviate from that perfect optimal route that's drawn right there and still be only, say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you enter the number, slower than the actual optimal route. Like here, you see down in here, the shading is wider to the left, to the south, and narrower to the north. So I'd start, when in doubt, I'd be hedging more towards the center of the shading there. And here the shading is quite wide, etc. So this is an alternative to using the reverse isochrones, which were the initial method that we used to assess riskiness, because an optimal route and a single dotted line is not good enough for what we're doing. We need to be able to assess risk, and because we understand the limitations of the weather models. Back to stanza. The Synoptic Breeze. So as I say, sometimes you get to West End and you're in the Synoptic Breeze. Somewhere in this situation here, you can see a bit of an eddy and the southwesterly, pretty typical actually. But looks like by the time we're at the outer edge of the islands, we're now in that nice synoptic 20 to 25 knots of breeze going out. So we're talking in this case of about 100 miles the race course. And there we're going to be relying on some tools that we don't rely on during the race, partially because we don't have a lot of enough bandwidth to get the models, and partially because high resolution models aren't available out there, and they probably wouldn't help us anyway, because there isn't enough weather observations to be able to get an enhanced prediction any better than the global models. So we're going to be looking at high resolution models. My favorite high resolution model for the United States is the HRR, the HRRR, high resolution rapid refresh model. It updates every hour, and but I normally get it from Sail Docs, although Nick has made it available also in Expeditions weather download, so you can get it from 2 sources within Expedition. You can also figure out where to get it on the internet if you want to go that route, but I do everything within Expedition whenever I can. Observations, very important. You're not going to be browsing around on the internet when you're 10, 20 miles offshore Catalina. The cell, even if you have already installed the best cell antennas, which is what I always do on my boats, so that you do have cell data as long as possible, because then you'll get a few more model runs before you are on the expensive or maybe too slow to get the high runs satellite data. You're looking at those high you're not browsing around. You need to have preliminarily figured out what observations and have a list of where those observations are coming from. I really like looking at the interpolate. If race start day is very similar to the day before, it helps to look and see how the sea breeze evolved during the day to Catalina and to the outer islands on previous days. And there's a great resource that NOAA provides for those interpolated wind maps that you can get online. And in the Hawaii course at the Academy, we talk about that. But as always in this part of the race, beware of the extra distance. The goal is to get out to where you're ripping and you're just VMCing. Next stage is the reach to the ridge. The ridge is the nose on the high. This one is pretty squished down by a low that's passing to the north, but there is always a ridge that emanates to the southeast from the Pacific High, and that is where the wind weight, the wind direction, everything changes very quickly, and you quite quickly, as I said, get into the downwind mode. So you are racing to a point here, and how far you deviate from the Great Circle route to the Hawaii is the $1,000,000 question. Where is your point? And you know, in the old days, there was a latitude and longitude that people like Benny Mitchell's father would, you know, have written down in some little secret book. But nowadays, we've got routing tools. We've got Chris Bedford to help us. We're going to make an educated decision on where we're routing to, where we're shooting for, based on real-time information. This race is certainly the easiest time to get south, and sometimes getting south is good. It certainly gets us, imagine if the high was in the normal place, it gets us away from the center of the high, but it causes us to sail extra distance. And caveat to what I just said, beware of routing too close to the high. Weather routers, your polars, are normally not well tuned, and they will, you know, play for that right shift and go farther north than you really want to go in this race. So you beware of getting too close to light and lumpy. It's not fast. Okay, the slot cars portion, I've drawn it right here, is sort of the portion where now the wind is aft all the way, and we're in VMG mode. There, the router shows a little, when you see a dashed line like we see right in here on an optimum route, we can see that the router is jibed down. But with the 5-minute shading on, well, hey, you know, that's probably not, 5 minutes may not be worth the harangue of jibing right there. But this is the section where basically port jibe is too painful to exist, and you're just trying to get west and into the final running stage of the race. Fast VMG, you're normally sailing hot VMG mode unless you're trying to get south. This is in some cases, you know, a pretty fun time of the race because you don't have the navigator or the watch captains or your friend telling you, hey, stop reaching up, we're trying to get downwind now, because you're almost fetching. So it feels like your VMCing by sailing hot is okay. Jibes to port are painful. And then the finish approach, that last third of the race. And if you look at the routings of, you know, it's fun to look at the race trackers of previous races. There's a lot that goes on here. Sometimes there's playing shifts, sometimes it's one and in, or some vestige of this. This is an ocean race. And you're going to have to pick the corner. And that decision is being made at the end of the slot car phase. The cool thing about thinking of the race in Stan's conceptual model is you don't have to worry about the finish approach. I mean, yes, it does factor into the routing, but you basically are addressing each sort of 36-hour period discreetly, and then moving on to the next. Diurnal breathing. We played this big time in the last Transpac, and because the high was fairly stationary, and so the feature of the natural diurnal daytime to nighttime breathing of the high caused shifts and wind speed variations that we were able to play on Pyewacket and take advantage of it. And then, of course, the big X factor that can affect the approach to the islands are those tropical waves and or storms that travel along, usually south of the racetrack, but can cause a disturbance of the force and a bend to the isobars. And then, of course, everybody will tell you that the only way to race to Hawaii is to come into Kalapapa, the point where the leper colony used to be on the island of Molokai, port pole, and then jibe to starboard and try to keep it as deep as possible. One more step down before you get into the channel, the Molokai channel, and don't watch out for the cocoa head puff. All those famous sayings from the Hawaii races, worth listening to, but let's use science and our routing tools. We can probably go one step better than that now these days. The diurnal breathing, you said, what was that? Well, this is part of Chris Bedford's weather presentation in the Hawaii course, and he goes a lot more into it. Basically, in the absence of any movement of the high going north, south, east, or west, or a intensifying or or a fading of it, it will naturally breathe. And Chris explains the meteorological reasons for that. As far as us sailors are concerned, it causes a wind direction. This is true wind direction on the y-axis here, and this is time of day, Pacific Standard Time. And here we have a big lefty around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and a righty 3, 4 a.m. and then a right again. So it looks like your compass adjuster came out and did this, but max left, you want to be when the wind's left, you want to be on port. When the wind's left, you want to be on starboard. So it's colored green. Max right here, and take a look at the course to learn more about the breathing. But this, I found this to be a big factor, and the global weather models will pick it up. All right, there we are doing Transpac in 2017 on board Catapult. The Santa Cruz 70. Preparation for the Navigator. Get organized ahead of time. There's no way, I mean, if you could be on the boat with a fast internet connection, not some dodgy tethering off your phone thing, for a week before the start of the race, you still wouldn't get everything done. I'm convinced of that. I mean, there's just so much you can do to get organized. You can make all the stuff that you bring lighter. You can just have everything Gucci'd out more and more. So for you navigators, try to give yourself a day or a few, especially before the cruise all around, just getting the systems all sussed and your head reoriented. Because one of the challenges in an offshore race like this is you have to stay, you the navigator, and really everybody on the boat has to stay sharp. And you're not going to stay sharp if you are recreating things or trying to remember how to do something. So the more you refamiliarize yourself with the systems, using expedition, all the steps that you do in the race, good value in that. Comms, be fluent with your satellite data, understand the bandwidth issues and your limitations. Artie's very good at helping me with that. Your weather preparation, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, and studying previous races and historical weather study. There's a lot to do. I mean, I'm already starting to do a little bit of work for sailing on Paiwacket this summer. And then this is never ending. Polars. The better your polars are, the better your routing will be. So every time you go sailing, you're using strip chart to analyze cog and sog versus heading and boat speed. You're looking at wind direction wobble every time you tack and jibe, and trying to make your instruments better so that your log files are better, so you can use those log files to update your polars to have a better representation of how the boat's going to be sailing during the race, because garbage in, garbage out when it comes to weather routing. Another thing you want to be practicing, and we talked about this, so we'll set you up with the Caribbean 600. Remind me to do that in the Q&A section, is getting good at race tracking and getting your expedition boat ID file in, putting your ratings in, starting times in, so that you can use Expedition's handicap calculator to tell how you're doing during the race. It's a really valuable tool. And this was something that got me the first time I did the race. I mean, the bearing to Hawaii isn't always 245. It changes. Yeah, the Great Circle route is shorter than a straight line. So really, the shortest distance is a changing course all the way in. But of course, you have to factor that with the weather as well. But important to at least have in the back of your mind. Communication. This is something we don't do enough. Practice our communication between the Navigator and Afterguard. One of the things I noticed in the Jamaica race is, I'd already done a lot of pre-race preparation with everybody on the crew. I think it's not just the Afterguard, everybody on a Transpac crew. You should get buy-in with them and have them understand what the big picture game plan is. But when watch captains would wake up and come to the nav station, the main thing that they're interested in, or you got to at least cover, is here's what's happened since you've been down. I usually look at strip chart. I talk about any sail changes, but give them the wind speed and wind direction, and the strategy of what we're doing, what the mode sailing is, what the mandate is on deck for how we're sailing. Are we VMCing? Are we VMGing? Are we looking for shifts? Are we waiting for that lefty to jibe? Those sort of big picture things. But then take a look at the weather model and say, I expect in the next 4 hours or however long he or she is going to be up on deck, here's what the models, you're going to see 3 knots of wind speed increase, and it's going to go to the right enough so that we start seeing the, 75 to 80 degrees. We're starting to think about jibing and that sort of thing. If you do plan on going down, navigators, if you are not standing a watch, and I try not to stand a watch, but luckily I sail on big enough boats, I guess luckily, that I can float, is when I do go down, I always make sure the watch captain on deck knows I'm down, has some instructions, or hey, wake me up if anything goes outside of this range, or if you have any questions at all, and just to let them know that you're down, because sometimes they think the navigator is working and watching something like, you didn't see that right shift. I mean, hey, we've been sailing for 2 hours. We thought you saw it. No, I was asleep. Understand the lingo. So I did some coaching in the last few Hawaii races, some teams, and we start practicing an in-race briefing. And you only get like 5 minutes to do it. Do a Zoom call with your Afterguard to have the whole team there, but the navigators say, create a what if scenario where just out of the Synoptic Breeze and picking our waypoint to the ridge, and we are instructing the crew on deck how to sail the boat, what the VMC course is, etc. Wherever you can be in the middle of the race in the slot course, it could be any point of the race, and you should probably practice a few different ones, but then practice, download a weather file, pretend the boat's here, and then do that next 4-hour briefing. Practice doing the briefing and have the conversation back and forth. The navigator shouldn't be a one-way street. The best afterguards that I've sailed with are the guys and girls who women that help me reason things out and ask good questions. I sailed for years with a super famous ocean racer named George David in a series of boats called Rambler. He was the CEO and chairman of the board of one of the largest companies in America, United Technologies. That guy could ask great questions. And when he sat down in the nav station, he would ask a series of questions that really got me thinking better too. It really helped push me. He was a good sailor. He understood wind shifts. He understood weather forecasts and stuff. But he left the wizardry stuff to me. But you don't want to be the navigator that hides everything and says and doesn't show the information. You want involvement. The more the merrier. And so this sort of pre-race practice, which you can do on shore, dedicate 15 minutes every 2 weeks from now to the race, you'll get your terminology better. The people that aren't running the box, the computer, will learn more about what the tools are available there. And the navigator who's giving the briefings will get better at giving them. Navigator on deck below. I love this picture of me navigating Orion Mod 70 because where am I? I'm on deck. You got to spend time on deck, not only to communicate with the crew, but also to have your eyes open and see the sky and the clouds and pay attention to the instruments and the weather. It's better and your weight's in a better place as well. Maybe they'll let you do a little bit of sailing. I don't get to steer very much anymore. It's sad. But spend time on deck. Don't be the navigator that's just always down below. come up with a system. If you have to bring an iPad, just charge it. They're pretty light, and then you can bring some of your homework or show things to the sailors on deck. Never wake up surprised. Always leave instructions if you're going to sleep, and then finally stay rested. Because the decisions that you make, the more tired you get, this isn't a hero thing. I used to try to push through long races. Not anymore. I'll go down and take a 20-minute cat nap, and I'm much better. Sailing team communication, big section about this in the Hawaii course. There's the navigator to the watch captains or the afterguard. There's how the watch captain passes this information on to the sailing team. It's like a game of the kids' game of telephone. It's amazing how screwed up a general strategy can come as it's handed off. So your job, everybody on the boat, is to make sure that this communication system works and the telephone game doesn't fall apart. And that's every time there's a position change, whether changing main trimmers, changing helmsmen, just repeat the mode and the instructions of what you're trying to do. The all-important handoff. The one thing I hate on board an offshore boat is when the AB watch system, where somebody's been driving, or let's say in the middle of a watch with the AB system where there's X number on deck and they all go down below and the other group goes on deck. There's just too much of a change. It's too jarring to the boat's performance. But if, let's say, the helmsman's changing, never do a multiple change. Keep the main trimmer and spinnaker trimmer the same for at least 5 minutes anytime there's a helmsman change. Same thing with the spinnaker trimmer. Keep the rest of the speed team the same. Try to stagger your rotations so that you keep you don't lose the knowledge that you've gained during that period. I mean, maybe the person's going to do a much better job on the spinnaker trim, but still you want the feedback. It's still good to identify that and so that you can learn from it. Excuse me, the VMG sailing versus VMG sailing, mode sailing. This is we go into this in more depth in the Hawaii course. This is a polar diagram in Expedition. The wind's coming from the top of the page. If the wind is coming from the top of the page, Expedition will choose for a particular wind speed the true wind angle, the target true wind angle and speed that is best for optimum VMG sailing. But if you know that there's going to be a wind shift, and this applies in short course buoy racing, if you know the wind's going to go to the left, like the blue wind direction goes left 10 degrees, then it pays to deviate. It may pay to deviate from that optimum VMG true wind angle and do a bit of walling. So the concept of walling, hot VMG versus deep VMG mode, all should become part of the parlance that everybody on the speed team can talk about, and you can shift gears and play it, because they are all modes that can come into play and be valuable in this race. We talk about the concept. Here's a target sheet: true wind speed, boat speed downwind, boat's true wind angle. It's nice to print one of these out on deck, even if you're displaying, like Artie and I do, the targets from Expedition on one of the jumbos, or somewhere on deck that the speed team can see. Because the instruments can go down, you can always refer to them. But here's an example about bracketing your targets and being aware of your targets. If in 14 knots of wind, true wind speed, you're sailing at 13.5 at 145, you're obviously matching your target speed at 14, but you're sailing hotter. If you're in VMG mode, usually the polars are pretty good. If your calibrations are accurate and the error in the true wind angle is not just because of instrument calibration, try sliding downrange or further up on the chart to a slightly slower speed, say 13.2 knots at 146. Therefore, rather than matching this and the boat speed target and losing to the true wind angle target, we slide down a little bit and lose a little bit to both. VMG sailing don't beat and match one target and lose to the other for no good reason. And there we can see the section there that we're talking about. So this sort of being aware of your targets and your polars, and it's nice not to be arguing about if the targets and polars are correct or not in the race. Practice, practice, practice. I said I'd talk about safety. There's my nightmare from the Fastnet race of 2011. I just gave a safety at sea course presentation on this. Few bullet points just for you navigators to write down and remember. Make sure you understand your man overboard button or buttons and the procedures, how they work on your devices. That includes the deck ones, that includes the expedition, that includes any GPSs, that includes VHF or any other devices that you have. You know, Iridium Go. What are all the what tools and where are all those buttons and how they work? Always monitor VHF 16. I promise you that on any boat that I'm sailing on, there will be a VHF radio charged on deck that the on watch is listening to. Sure, it's on down below, but people are sleeping down there. Sometimes nobody's monitoring a radio down below. It's on deck, and if you call for help, we'll hear you. And if I call for help, I'm hoping you have your ears on too. Understand your hardware. That's where that week ahead of time where you're like, oh yeah, how's this Iridium Go really work in emergency mode? And take the time to collate all the emergency contact numbers. Transpac, the race office, provides a lot of good contact information. I can remember, and you enter a search and rescue, etc. Hawaii versus West Coast. Enter all that stuff in all your sat phones, including the one that goes in your ditch bag. Enough said. In the course on Hawaii, we go into depth on satellite, the race boat electronics, and Artie really helped in coming up with the outline and this presentation here. Some just general golden rules. Keep it simple. Don't get too fancy. I can't tell you how many boats we've gotten on where the owners has this big company and they have their IT guy who is like the smartest IT person in the world that runs the whole company, and they get involved with the boat's electronic system. Warning, warning, don't do that. It's not bound for failure. Installation and by a marine electronics professional with racing knowledge. There's a few good ones out there. Obviously, you got one in the room right now. Like 2, prepare for extreme conditions. Stuff is going to get wet in this race that you may never have seen water in any of the races the boat's done heretofore. Be ready for that. Know your equipment and have a backup plan if a particular device doesn't work. If a GPS goes out, how are you going to navigate? You probably have a few GPSs actually ported into Expedition if they're set up well, and you can use the AISs. But you need to know how to do that. And then practice, practice, practice. A word on satellite data. We changed on PyWacket because we have all carbon sails and racing to PV a few years ago, and I should have learned it from the when we raced Orion in the trimarans with carbon sails. The satellite is directly on the rum line down Baja. So therefore, on a boat with all carbon sails, if you have your antenna in the center and you're jibing back and forth on even jibes, you don't see your fleet Inmarsat satellite. The fleet device does not see it, and you have no fleet connection. It happened to me for 95% of the race. Use the Iridium Go on PyWacket the whole way. So we went and we obtained the Iridium Certus device, which has speeds. There's a few different devices. In fact, Iridium Go just came out with a excuse me, a new device that actually is a Certus that is reads satellites in the whole network that are moving around. It's not a single satellite, geostationary satellite, but a whole network. And therefore, we were able to get satellite data up and down the coast. In the next race, the Cabo race that we did, or the PV race that we did. So how much airtime do you need? Test everything at home, use a low bandwidth email, understand your pricing from your satellite provider, and test everything on home and test everything on the boat. Don't waste this airtime data. Beware of all the things that a Windows computer does to just do things in the background and suck data. Avoid Gmail and other email. Heck, think about all the things you do now where, you know, like, oh, we'll log you in, but we just need to send you a text. Ain't gonna happen in the middle of the race, or if it is, it's gonna cost a lot to do that. We're using a whitelist on PyWacket in our PepWave router, or Glasswire as a piece of software that can help you monitor and potentially even prevent unneeded leakage of data. The safest thing to do is turn the satellite device off after you finish downloading. There's a big balance between the Iridium Go versus the Fleet versus the Certus, and we get into that more in the Hawaii course. As I mentioned, Nick does provide a free license of Expedition. Go to expeditionmarine.com and download the software. I would recommend, there's two different versions, the normal version or the 4D version. It just has to do with which type of CMAP chart. They're exactly the same, but which CMAP chart type they use. 4D is the future of CMAP. They're going to retire the CMAP MT max charts soon. So if your boat doesn't already own a subscription to the CMAP max charts, and you don't really even need CMAP for a race in the Americas, because you can get all the charts for free from NOAA if you want to go that way. NOAA free chart downloader. Google that and you can download both raster charts and ENC charts. At any rate, get the 4D version unless you already own CMAP, and then install it on a PC, launch it for the first time. You'll be given unique code, and Artie will be very happy to hook you up and get you the unlock code so you can try the 30-day license. And Artie is also a dealer of Expedition, so you can buy from him should you choose to do so. We're going to get to the Q&A quite quickly here after a little break, but we're going to let's just talk quickly about big picture of routing with Expedition. I didn't spell Expedition right. How about that? You need three things: a route, of course, you need polars, and you need weather. And I already mentioned garbage in, garbage out. The more accurate all these things are, the better off you are. For course creation, keep it simple for routing. You don't want a lot of waypoints, and you have a choice of using marks versus sail notes and race notes. We can show that more, and that's detailed in some of our Expedition classes on the Academy. Polars, again, a never-ending challenge to make your polars better, but the first step in polar improvement is to calibrate your instruments, and that takes time. You aren't going to be able to adjust your polars until you're pretty confident of your boat speeds and your wind angles and wind speeds, and that takes a bit of sailing. I like instrument tuning before polar editing. I like keeping my polars smooth. It's got a little bit of a bump there, but it's fairly smooth in shape. I don't like big bumps and dips. Some people like that, but say there's holes and soft spots in the boat's performance. For me, I like them smooth. I like to have enough columns that you're capturing any intricacies and variations of boat performance in the non-VMG mode, but not so many that it's really hard to edit your polars. So 7 pairs of columns with 0 and 180 being 2, so 5 pairs of columns. Then you have your VMG up and your VMG down. If I could slide this, you'd see your VMG down. So now we're down to 3 pairs of columns. So jib reaching, This has too many already. Jib reaching 90 and hot spinnaker reaching. Make sure that you scale your polars to masthead wind if you're going to be using your expedition on a boat, because the wind speed that we refer to on the boat is masthead. As far as group files go, it's important, especially in the Hawaii race, to stay organized, have good Windows file management skills, understand what models. We'll take a look at some of this in a little bit, but Expedition has a lot more models available than even the last Hawaii race I did. Although Chris Bedford points out that the latest model isn't necessarily the best, I like updating my models as soon as they become available. So I pay attention to their availability time. That's something you can do and fine tune in the week leading up to the race. Also, I have a cheat sheet that can get you started on that in the Hawaii course. In general, I always do individual routes with each grid file, each weather model. I don't ever have multiple weather files like the EC and the HRR combined together unless I have a really good reason to do that. And then nowadays we have the ability to get more weather models. So it used to be just once you're offshore, you'd navigate with the route with the GFS all the way to Hawaii. And now we get some more possibilities. So it's important to assess the model's performance and try to pay attention to which is your favorite. Now, the best model, what is the best model? There is no best model. It depends. And what weather models have limitations, and there will be, just because the European model has been working well doesn't mean the German icon model might not be best for the next. So keep an open mind. Race tracking with AIS. I want you to get good at two things. One is, this is more for coastal racing, but Expedition has great ability. We built it all in from our America's Cup days of race tracking, of tracking, enemy tracking with AIS. If your enemy has AIS on, then you can follow that. And I've got some YouTubes like that on online, and also in some of our expedition courses in the academy, I talk about how to do that. But it's a really powerful tool. And then, of course, this is an example of a fairly old Hawaii race with position reports coming in from Yellow Brick. And that I urge you to practice in just on shore with some upcoming races. The 600, you can practice with the 600. Unfortunately, it's not sort of a point-to-point race, so it gets a little convoluted with range and bearings and stuff. But it's good to practice. And if you're not doing Cabo, you can practice it for Cabo. Go to the Yellow Brick site and find a race that's live and figure out what its expedition moniker is and practice tracking it, because there are some great tools for that in there. Pre-race weather study. There's a whole section in the Hawaii course on this. Know your weather links. We provide you with a set of weather links. Of course, the Ocean Prediction Center, the ocean.weather.gov is a key place. There's sort of three things I wanted to show you, something new that I've been doing using the Predict Wind for the pre-race prep. But we have the historical analysis. As I said, I just put a historical grid file into the Hawaii course, which is good to do now. Ensemble routing, which you start about 10 days before the race. And the sort of ensemble routing, it's sort of like the word tacking. It has multiple meanings. And then getting good with Predict Wind, all in the pre-race prep, is something that I would recommend doing. Here's an example of something that we did with historical routing just for the Jamaica race. And you can see, so I just produced this for the crew. It's a standard table, true wind speed, true wind angle, colored these all hot. I show you how to do this in the Hawaii course for ensemble routing. Also, our sail chart on the Powhatan 70 is pretty simple. So it tells us the average usage. This is 142 runs over 10 years. And we were interested on whether we were going to beat the record or not, which Artie and I hold on board the Teton, and happy to say we still hold. But it provided some good takeaways even for this race. But if you're doing sail optimization or rating optimization for your boat, a historical weather study is very valuable. And here, looking very similar, because I used the same expedition drawing tools to crunch the data, is an ensemble analysis of a Hawaii race with a sail chart, hours used. Better bring the A2, maybe bring 2. There's a tip for you. And I'll start doing my ensemble analyses, as I say, about 10 days before the start. You know, people ask me, hey, is this going to be a windy year or a light year? How do you know? The race isn't for another few months. If you ask the weather professionals if this was going to be a wet year in Southern California or a dry year, they said, well, it's La Nina, so the odds are it's going to be a dry year. And everything's looking pretty green out in the mountains. The horses are eating lots of grass. So you can't tell this far out. Don't even bother yourself with that. You're looking this far out at historical stuff and honing your skills, being able to use expeditions so that you don't waste a lot of time or energy in your sleep deprived state during the race, and you get your chops down on weather routing with expedition. And then you start using the ensemble analysis leading up to the race to really focus in on, is it going to be a windy or a light year? Study. The 8-class fundamentals course, here's some other course, the Marine Weather University. Have a look around, highly encourage it. And we'll save this for later. So at this point, I am going to suggest at 7:15 that we take a 3-minute break and come back for some questions. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you, Peter.
I'll see you in 3.
Okay, beautiful.
Thanks. Quick break, everybody.
So yeah, just to the group out there, still have 110 people. So yeah, this is just really fantastic having Peter here. And I think we had a little glitch in the beginning with the chat room, but Artie has been firing away answering questions. So hopefully that will continue, and all good. Just back in a few.
Okay, guys, I'm back. Take shorter than usual. So the first thing I want to do is show you the predict wind. I'm a fan of any weather model of any source of weather information. And there is they have great weather models, great high resolution weather models. It's just there's no one is better than the other. Don't get hung up on that. But one of their cool resources I've been using a lot because it saves me some time when I'm it's not a replacement to doing ensemble routing with Expedition by any means, but it is a quick way to do things and to share information with the crew. And that is to use essentially the ensemble routing tools within Predict Wind. So with that, I'm going to share. I'm logged into Predict Wind. You need a pro account to do this. This is the Jamaica course. You can export your marks file from Expedition and import it into there. We'll have to start at the start time, the 8th at 8 p.m., 8:04. Yeah, let's start now. We're in New York time zone, so they sort of get time zone specific. And then
Peter,
you just click.
Sorry to interrupt you. I don't think we see your screen, Sharon.
You are absolutely right. Here we are, the Jamaica race course. You can import. I just exported my Expedition racetrack. I keep it as simple as possible. These are all leave to starboard marks. And then you set a start time. Obviously, you know what the start time is for Transpac. So with like about, I don't know, about 5 days to go before the start of Transpac, I would start looking at this. The problem is some of their weather models don't go out very far. This is not using the ensemble weather models. This is using a bunch of global weather models, the real things or the main candidates together and looking at all their results together, which Chris Bedford also calls the ensemble method. So that's why I say. So we're going to set a start time. We could whenever it is, and then I've already imported. In this case, this is Pyewacket's polars. Again, this is Expedition polars. They import really well. I say we sail at 100% all the time, and I probably scale the wind speed using that formula that's in the Expedition help file. And I say use some of the Mercator currents, which are a pretty good current model. And then you just click go. And again, this is kind of a quick and dirty way of doing it. It doesn't give you nearly the analytical tools that we have in Expedition, but it is, you'll see in like 30 seconds, I'm going to have some numbers that I can look at. And especially when things are changing quickly, it's a good cross check with all the work that I'm doing in Expedition. Of course, using something like this in a race that has normal racing rule of sailing 41 would be totally illegal because it's basically using boat specific data. It's basically private weather routing. So this is something I would only use before the start of the race. The weather models, maybe you can download them if the notice of race, particular race relaxes rule of 41, but I would say the routing would never be legal unless they specifically allowed that sort of outside help, which I've never seen. I guess they do so in some races, but here, looks like a slow one, doesn't it? But so you can see the snail trail, which I don't find particularly helpful. You can turn on the weather map of each one, but the cool thing I like are these tables. And here they're showing, it's sort of looking at like sail flow. If you're looking at the HRR and the sail flow high resolution model for racing your Cal 20 on Saturday, you get a bunch of graphs and you can kind of sort of see the trends. If there's agreement like there is here in wind speed, wow, it's windy. Looks like the wind is a dead beat all the way out. Wow, it's an easterly the whole way there, and pretty good agreement as well. Let's tack back and forth, true wind angle. So this is just a little bit of rain later on. Temperature, if you care about that. Waves. I usually look at these top two things and then the summary page, because how long is the race going to take? surprisingly close to the record, even with all that beating. It's amazing the record has lasted as long as it has in the Jamaica race. Passage time, max wind speed, maximum gust, percent time upwind. Again, just kind of a neat tool that I've used and I find helpful. But you're not going to be using this during the race. You're going to be using the real thing. So a few of you, before I open it up to questions, I just wanted to hit a few that were in the Q&A, and a few of you were said, hey, I just like to look over your shoulder and see how you do things. Okay, I'm going to create, whoops, I'm going to click the wrong button like I usually do. I'll create a route. I always leave it called easy route and make it close. Hit the escape key that stops building it, and I zoom in. And as I normally set up my routing for this race to be from West End, if I wanted to be super.
Can't see your screen again.
Oh, sorry about that. Back to step one. Thank you for sharing that. Creating the route. I use the easy route tool. I quickly plant the eggs, hit the escape key, then zoom in and fine tune it so it's navigationally correct. I normally set my Hawaii races to start at West End. I just add an hour or two to my start time as a best guess based on whatever boat I'm on. To me, routing from all the way here introduces too many variables. Let's get closer to the synoptic wind for the routing of this race. You can route from the start if you want. This is how I do it. And if I really wanted to, be navigationally correct, I'd get a higher resolution model. In this case, I've got the CMAP 4D going. I really like using the scrolling wheel on a mouse. Even on PyWacket, I use the scrolling wheel on not on a fixed mouse, but one of those that sits in the navs. You can the rollerball kind. Your choice. Always lock your marks when you're done. Who cares what it's named? I'll go back to that world chart, zoom out, go to Hawaii. At this point, I'm not navigating, so I'm just going to guess where Diamond Head Light is, Diamond Head Buoy. Right click, select the chart. Pretty close for beginners. It's going over land, Peter. Yeah, so what? At this point, it doesn't really bother me that much. Get close to the mark so the arrow appears. Right click. You can say edit it and lock it, or just hit lock mark there. That right click button is a powerful tool in Expedition. Now I will go and I will I have a route. I get a weather file. So let's spend a minute looking at all the weather information available in Expedition, because Nick's added a lot. Sail docks, you draw the square first before you get the box. And I drew kind of a generous square there. If I was on satellite data, I'd make it smaller. Sail docks, in general, I will do the GFS from sail docks, unless I want to get the 0.11 degrees GFS, which is kind of cool, in which case Expedition has that. Expedition has both the GFS, the icon, and the HRR. And so in general, the easiest, I always get the HRR from sail docks, because Jim has added this HRRX, because 4 times a day he goes out 48 hours. He doesn't, NOAA does. Our tax dollars pay for the HRR to be run out to 48 hours. So you can download the current HRR whenever you want, but you can always go back and in any 6-hour period get that HRRX model. You set the, so let's just say we're going to download the GFS. If I'm just offshore, I probably will only download wind. I'm sorry for those of you that think I'm looking at the 500 millibars all the time. I will look at weather charts. I will look at sea level pressure, but in general, because I'm downloading so many gribs every 4 times a day, I'm not always downloading all that information. And Nick's got however many days, I don't know how long, I'll go 1/4 degree resolution, since I have a fine I have a fast internet connection. In the Hawaii course, I talk about how you can be really smart and download a grib file for the whole race course in 3 chunks and save money and data and time doing it. But there, meanwhile, I'm downloading, this is sort of new, a progress bar, and it's in. Where's the weather? Well, it's there. She turns on, and of course Nick's got a palette, and I haven't programmed all the palettes there. If I double click the menu bar, this menu, if I double click the menu name, the bar opens, and you can see it. I normally keep it closed for screen, but you can go in and change, be your own Renoir to change what you see, how the weather information is displayed. Well, that's how I would download the weather file. Now, I said I was going to take a look at some of the different models that are available. Let's just run through the whole thing. Squid, I generally don't use much for this race, but it is a convenient play, except for getting the 1/2 degree GEFs, the global ensemble. It's the GFS ensemble. When we're in that last 10-day period, we're doing ensemble routing with a bunch of variations of the GFS model called the GEFs. And there's like 33 of them or something. And then I would use that. You don't really have the bandwidth or the interest to use ensemble routing during a race, because by then you're looking close enough in and you have enough global models already available, even if you're in the middle of the ocean, that you don't need to do that. So download all there. The NAM model is available from Squid. You need to have an account. So in some races where racing rule of sailing of 41 is enforced as it's written, I would make sure I had a free account so that the data I'm getting is freely available. But in general, they also have the HRR, but in my experience, Squid is a little bit late, so I tend to not use them except thing. Expedition, Nick has done a great job here. Again, I'm drawing the box. I'm just holding down my mouse and drawing the box. And now look at all these. He's got the GFS model at 0.1 degrees. Basically, all these services are just mining data that's at NOAA or at other meteorological services, mostly national meteorological services. There's the HRR. The problem with using getting NICs is you only get the HRRX if you're lucky in the 1 hour period where it's the current HRR model. So that 48-hour one. So that's why I use that. The unified model is the UK model, very, very good. The Icon model is the German. We saw that also available in SailDocs, very good. The Canadian model, GDPS, another global model. Again, all these at better than 1/4 degree resolution, also very good. And then there it is, the one that they wrote all the books about, the ECWMF, only a 0.4 degree resolution. Boo. If you have a PredictWind Pro account and use PredictWind offshore software, you can get a higher 9-kilometer resolution of the EC model if the racing rules of sailing are relaxed to allow that type of data. But if the racing rules of sailing are not relaxed, then this is freely available and you're good to go. Arpège, the French model, the French swear by it. Stan swears by it. So I must admit that in the last race to Hawaii I did, all those global models I mentioned, I would look at. maybe not every 6 hours. I mean, you got to be somewhat, that's a lot of data to look at, but at least once a day, I would look at probably most of them. There is a problem though in Expedition, and the fact is that Nick and he serves all these up on a cloud that he's got, and at the 6Z and 18Z runs, the time frame is not as full length as the 0 and 12Z runs. And you have to pay attention because Nick will change over as soon as the new model is available. Like if the 0Z was available, let's say for the icon, and then all of a sudden the 6Z went into his cloud, he nukes the 0Z, it's gone. And the 6Z only goes out for 60 hours, which isn't enough to route all the way to Hawaii. So you need to do a bunch. That's what you do in the week beforehand, is you understand Nick's limitations. On his website, he talks about which models are available and how far out. But basically, you can easily get stung by his system of what he makes available. He has to pay for the cloud space, so it's thankful that he does as much as he does. But all those global models are good, and I'll give you an example. Like the GFS here, same as Sail Docs, but I always click runtime, and it tells me, okay, we're looking at the 18Z run, but it goes out 240 hours. So that's a good long chunk for a race like this. But let's look at the Unified, the UK model. See 18Z run, see that? It only goes out 60. So before I download, I'll double check by clicking runtime. And Nick provides the GDPS was in the Jamaica race, it was slow. It was like 2 days old. So I didn't even look at it. But probably the GFS and the EC are still my two favorite global models. Nick highly regards the icon. As I say, Stan regards the arpege. Obviously 72 hours doesn't get you very far down the track, but we're dealing with the 18Z run. When the 0Z run comes out, it's a little bit further out. I don't think the arpege goes out that far. And then the Mercator current model, which is cool. And it uses satellite sea surface heights, so it's not perfect, but it's nice to have a grid file that's pretty accurate. The RTOFS in Sail Docs is also available. So there's sort of new features within Expedition and some new models. I have no idea what the OFS is. Maybe Artie knows. Here's just a little tip for those of you that are sailing in other places around the world. Look at this. I'm going down to do the Caribbean 600 next week. Nick is running the WRF model, which is a really freely available high resolution model, open source, that we all can get. There's actually a place where you can buy your own WRF runs anywhere on the planet. Sailflow has their own, they have their own WRF model that they run, and it's very helpful in the United States. I always look at that for coastal sailing around the United States. But Nick runs the WRF model in places where he doesn't do it in the US because we've got the HRR and he's got bandwidth. But in Europe, and if there's a race going on, you can email him and he'll might even make things available. But the Caribbean, Cape Town, Auckland, New Zealand, some cool places, again, works the same way. Let's go to, I'm going to go here and right click and go to My Grid. It's only available as the ASCAT. I've been playing with this a little bit. Right click, My Image. You can download, Nick has some images in the area. Now, this might not be the best place to get your satellite images, but it's worth playing around with this. I hope he will update this a little bit. And even the NOAA synoptic charts, like here. You could download the full Pacific weather chart right there, right click, open image. How about that? That's, that's, don't have to even go to the OPC, and Nick is providing us with that. So that's a neat feature that I was playing with in the last, again, that's right clicking anywhere on the chart and then going to my grid or my image. All right. I wanted to show one other thing, and that was race tracking before I get into the questions. And that first thing is, I just nuked the Jamaica race, so I will go in and I'll delete all the boats in race tracking to start out with. You should do this before you follow the Caribbean 600 race. Then you have to go to, and this I do a million times in the race. I even right click and add this to my quick access toolbar. So it's grayed out, so I've already added it. So the yellow brick tracking button here. And there I found the moniker for the Caribbean 600. Write this down, guys. Navigators C600 2023. Who would have guessed that? And you want to update the boat IDs, and you always want to archive all your stuff. You want to get it in on the expedition data. Download. Boom. Do we have a fleet yet? Nope. Waiting for boats to register. But soon the race starts in a week and a half, and you'll be able to do that. Then you'll be able to get your fleet of boats. If you're feeling sporting, you could enter their TCFs here. You could enter their start times and have some fun tracking and practicing this. It's really a powerful tool, the race tracking and expedition. And I have some examples of it in the Hawaii course. I will also just show the low bandwidth site here, because I've been using this a lot. Write this down, yb.tl/links/ and then fill in the blank. You can just start guessing. And even if they're not posted on the notice of race yet, you can often find the yellow brick code. It's always the same as the expedition code. And then these are all the links that you could, low bandwidth links you could use to get yellow brick data during a race. Why you don't need to do that, because it's built into expedition, but this is cool. Click for instructions. I love that. If you email use as the following subject: leaderboard, Maxi, Adrena, or expedition. So if you want the body of, just follow the instructions. So I usually subscribe, depending on the length of the race. I might subscribe to every hour or every 3 hours or something, and just have it come into my sail mail account. That way I don't miss a position report, and I don't have to be as religious about downloading it live in real time like I am with grid files. So that's a cool thing. So good to have that one of your links in your pre-race package. Okay, let's get some. Who's got some questions for me?
Peter, thanks for all that. Artie's done a great job of fielding some of the chat, but one of the things that came up that may, in case people didn't see it, is do you have any comments, either you or Artie, on Starlink?
I own Starlink. It's great. And I understand people are using it on boats. That's fantastic. I understand some people are using home stuff on Starlink and the home account. Some are using the RV account. And I understand they offer a maritime plan that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, and you probably get busted if you go offshore with it. I don't think it works more than a little ways off the coast, and they're going to catch us eventually. So I wouldn't rely, even if Starlink works right now, I wouldn't rely on it being something that's going to work for us long term for ocean racing. So you know, at the very bottom of the budget, you definitely should get an Iridium Go and also have a separate Iridium handset that's ready for your ditch bag, because you can't use the Iridium Go in your cell phone if you're in a life raft. But the Iridium Go is pretty cool. It interfaces well with Expedition and with airmail and sail mail, which is the email service that I use for all my racing. And it's slow, it's limited in data. You aren't going to be downloading the East, the European, the German, the UK, Canadian, and American models every 6 hours, but that'll get you there. Next level up is either the fleet broadband or the Certus broadband. And in Hawaii race, probably the carbon sales covering is not as big an issue as it was. And if your boat doesn't have carbon sails or doesn't have carbon head sails, it's not as big of an issue. But those are sort of the next level up.
All right. And then we had a couple of questions about the use of the availability or use of software to analyze grid files.
Right. So there is Chris Branning's model accuracy software. I can pull it up, is a way of vetting weather models and looking to see which are the most accurate, comparing performance to your recorded log files. That I know people that use that, and I've shared with Chris. He's a smart guy, and it's great stuff. I have not played extensively with it. I'm somewhat old school, so I like to look at the wind instruments and my strip chart and compare the weather data. Like here, I'll just do it right now, share screen and go back to screen 2 and back to Expedition. So let's go back to the chart here. I think I had a weather model in here. Where is it? Well, oh, here's something that Nick has changed. Settings has changed. I see, I just clicked weather data and the settings no longer has all the settings here on the left side. For weather optimal and weather data, he's limited it somewhat. And so if you want to get to the other settings, you have to, all the rest of the settings, you have to go to this settings. Even though it looks the same, this has all of them, including the weather and weather data. But it was a little bit of a pain to scroll, but I don't know whether I like it or not. At any rate, I do have a grid file loaded. Okay, weather. I will say weather. I'm going to move my zoom tool around now. There it is. And let's say our boat was right there. I would use the weather tooltip, boom, which I use all the time. And I would go to now, and I would use the weather tooltip and zoom way in and say, oh, this grid file says that the wind's 28 at 18.5 knots. And I would compare that to strip chart in the last 10 or 15 minutes and see. And if I had several different weather models, I would change between the two. You could do that here if I only have one weather model. If I had the EC and the Icon and we wanted to compare and see which one was performing better, I do that in real time this way rather than a tool. And because I've taken enough courses with Chris Bedford to understand the limitations of weather models, I am always going to approach every weather model's information with a bit of, professional, discernment, where I'm not 100% trusting anything, and I want to. Even if the model's been performing well in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to perform well in the future.
We had one question. You showed Rambler upside down, and someone was interested in having you elaborate on the story behind that. And I know from hearing that story, I think probably in 2011 at one of these seminars, I learned something about having 2 laptops. So you share that experience and what lessons learned?
Oh, you learned about this. So see this Ziploc bag right here? This is a Ziploc bag of Mountain House food. I'm going to be raffling this off at the university. It's beef stew. It's from a race boat that doesn't like beef stew. But this bag here, Ziploc bag, would be perfect. Put my personal computer in and carry it on the boat in case I needed, any phone numbers or anything that didn't have time to load onto the race computer. I had on the Rambler, it flipped over. 21 people separated from the boat. The boat was recovered 2 days later and flipped back up. The mast had broken. My computer was personal computer, which was on board the boat, was floating around in a sea of diesel and, whatever other fluid, salt water back in the back part of the boat. They opened it up, hit the button, and it turned on. Ziploc bag, Dell computer. So I'm a big Ziploc bag fan. The Rambler 100 story, the keel broke off the Super Maxi about an hour or 45 minutes after we rounded Fastnet Rock, as we're beating up wind in the Fastnet race in 2011. The boat capsized and fairly soon turned turtle. 5 people get separated from the boat for 3 hours in 57-degree water. There was no loss of life. We had a happy ending. We got rescued and taken to paradise in the form of the southwest coast of Ireland and the yacht club in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was an incredible experience and will forever change the way I approach a lot of things in life. But it made a bunch of pro sailors become a lot more respectful of safety at sea, and it made all of us a lot more appreciative of the fact that we're sailing. We had such skilled people that made good decisions in not a cookie cutter safety situation. The problem with safety, the challenge with safety situations is you go to a safety at sea course, but you have and you learn certain ways of doing things. But there's a million variations, and the answer it depends is the right answer for how do you deal with situations. So in the case of Rambler, when the boat was on its side, there were a number of decisions made, like throwing ropes out from the sheet bags so that people could hang on to the boat and not drift away, that saved lives, that were made by people, on the spur of the moment. It's not something you learned in the safety at sea course. And so I know I want to be sailing with the most experienced group of sailors, that have offshore experience, or at least, half my crew in a Transpac race. If I'm the most experienced person on the boat and it's a bunch of people who have only been offshore for the first time, I'm going to approach the race a lot differently than if I'm surrounded by skilled people. But it was quite an experience, and there is a BBC special somewhere that you can watch online about it.
Thanks for that. I'm just looking at a couple of questions that came in here. Let's see. Oh, how often do you update your optimal routing? Every time you download new weather data?
Yes, I will be optimal routing. You just do it so much. And this is why it's really important to practice this stuff in that week beforehand, you navigators, so you get really fluid with this, because you just do it so much and it's easy to make. We've all had those, we've all had these experiences where you go optimize, bing, and it just binged and it says no wind at the start, or unknown error. And every time you make a mistake with any of your working with a computer, or you ask Expedition to do something too fast and it crashes, you end up burning time. It's just sort of like having in the Volvo races where they break a sail, and so 3 of the crew members have to be down below working on the sail, and there are less people on deck and they get sleep deprived. Same sort of thing in navigation world. The more fluid you are and all these sort of things. But I am I have a cheat sheet that I have posted up in the nav station of what time of day and my watch time all the models become available, and that's to the minute if I can nail it down. And it varies a little bit. You know, the cloud servers don't always work at exactly the same time. So at least 4 times a day, when I'm in the middle of the ocean, I'm downloading new gribs, and I will always, on those 4 times, be updating my routing with whatever gribs I do download. I don't get rid of my old routes though, and I have a system where I color the GFS routes red and the EC routes are green and the NAM routes are blue and the UK routes are brown, and every model has a color. And once I get a new run, I will name it. You know, if you go into optimal here, let's do a run where it actually completes. So we have something here. So the reason it didn't start was it was trying to start a race in March 2022. So now we'll say now, and probably we'll get rid of this route here. Delete Mark II, right click. I'm going to say, I'm going to do go into optimal settings just so we see this. I'm going to go medium resolution just to make this go work faster. I normally would go high resolution, go medium. If we're in the race, obviously optimize from current position in time. There's a free course in the Academy on weather routing and grid files. For those of you who need a refresher, I'd suggest taking that. All these other things are display things. I'd make this as easy. Normally you calculate reverse isochrones, but I'm just doing it quickly right now. So I don't even know what polar do I have? Sail, polar, nav. The nav polar is PyWacket. Ooh, that's Robbie wouldn't let me show that to you. So I hope don't take screenshots of that. Sorry, Robbie. Now Expedition has 2 different routing methods, grid-based and isochronal based. I'm a grid guy. That was the first one. I normally will look at both. If they're close, I'll just keep with the grid. The isochronal should technically be a little bit better. Nick's very high on it. We could do both, but for the elements of time and for what I'm doing right now, I'm going to just click optimize grid based, and boom, I get a result. And I go into my results page, left click, and I will go here and I'll call this. Do you remember which model this was, folks? It was the 18Z run of the G. So I'll call this G18. And if I had in results the G12 and G6, I probably would nuke G6. And I would turn G12, I'd make it a little lighter shade of pink so it doesn't jump out as much. You can use whatever system you want, but I don't get rid of my old routes, but I do do at least a routing every 4 hours, and then sometimes I will in between the times when grid files are available, I'll noodle around with a particular problem, like, hey, what if I'll turn on I didn't calculate the reverse isochrones and shading, so I can't do it, but what if we went a little bit further north here? So I'll force it. I'll insert a mark here and route it again where it goes to there and fiddle with it. So at least 4 times a day is the simple answer.
Here's a $60,000 question. Can you address the data needs for a race of about 10 days and what sort of planned purchase would work well?
Well, I usually say I use a lot of data. I admit it. I waste some data. Occasionally I'll look at a football score or something. It's true. It's true. No, if certainly Artie can give you some good ideas too, but I usually say 50 megabytes per day is more than enough for race sailing. 50 megabytes per day. If you had 100, you could do all those weather models and stuff that we looked at every 4 times. But at some point, you want to spend time on deck. You don't want to be downloading stuff all the time. And for delivery, I say something like 10 megabytes per day. Artie, feel free to chime in on the chat or turn on unmute if you want to. I think Artie goes with 30 a day.
I think that addresses all the questions that have come up. If anybody wants to throw something in at the Q&A here at the last minute. Otherwise, between the two of you, I think we've answered everybody's questions.
Excellent. Well, I just really want to thank Artie for coming in here, because having somebody as skilled as him being able to answer your specific questions live in real time is just invaluable, and we're thankful for him for doing that. And he'll be navigating bad pack, so don't let him cross you out there in the middle of the ocean if you see him.
Good. So are we just about wrapped up, Peter?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
For those of you that want to, this won't be available to the people that are watching this days from now, but for the next 10 days, coupon code, I made one for the course. It's SHIFT, like wind shift, like shifty without the Y, gets you 10% off anything in the Academy or Marine Weather U.
Wonderful. Hey, and Artie, I know you're out there and as well, and both you guys, just a huge thanks for tonight and all that you do, for our sport and everything. And yeah, I've taken a few of the classes at the Marine Weather University, and they're really entertaining, and I can never get enough myself. So hopefully this will get a few of you out there fired up and learn more and go faster to Hawaii, and keep an eye on those 2 boats that these guys are on, because they'll be going the right way, most likely. Commodore, any last words before we sign off?
No, one question came up about the recording. It will get edited a bit, John, and get posted on the Transpac website and our YouTube channel in a couple of days.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Aloha.
Thanks to all the attendees. Really appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. Thanks, Peter.
See you on the
guys.
water.
All right. Take care, guys.